The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus and his disciples left from there and began a journey through Galilee. But he did not wish anyone to know about it. He was teaching his disciples and telling them, "The Son of Man is to be handed over to men, and they will kill him. And 3 days after his death, the Son of Man will rise." But they did not understand his saying, and they were afraid to question him. They came to Capernaum, and once inside the house, he began to ask them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they remained silent. They had been discussing among themselves on the way who was the greatest. Then he sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "If anyone wishes to be first, he shall be the last of all and the servant of all." Taking a child, he placed it in their midst, and putting his arms around it, he said to them, "Whoever receives one child such as this in my name receives me. And whoever receives me receives not me, but the one who sent me." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
The Son of Man is to be handed over. They will kill him, and 3 days after his death, the Son of Man will rise. He was only 3 when his mother died. His only brother, who was a bit older than he was, would die just 3 years later. And one day, coming home, where he shared an apartment with his father, he found his father dead on the floor of this apartment. Karol Wojtyła, known as Pope John Paul the Great, became an orphan at the age of 20. He had no other relatives at that point in his life. I say at that point because with time, he became the father, like Abraham, of many nations. But not only were his troubles limited to the loss of family members, the Nazis took over his country. And as a young man, he did hard labor in a stone quarry for a number of years. He had to attend an underground seminary for fear of being captured. And later on, some of his friends and some of the seminarians with whom he studied were sent to concentration camps where they finally encountered death. Later on, he would be run down by a German truck and nearly killed. And then after the end of World War II, when Europe was divided and Poland became part of the communist regime, they feared Stalin because he went with his many police and again brought destruction to a land that had known Catholicism for so many years. At the age of 60, an Islamic shot him down, and he nearly died. As an old man, he suffered from Parkinson's disease. In his case, it was so debilitating that towards the end of his life, he even found it difficult to breathe. Yet, when you think of John Paul II, he was a man who was overflowing with joy. He wrote a beautiful letter on suffering. Last week's gospel and this week's gospel speak about suffering. Now, no one wants to suffer, and don't look for suffering. Sometimes people can create their own crosses. There are enough crosses. Don't create your own, and don't give others your crosses. In other words, suffering in and of itself is certainly not a good thing. However, suffering, if we use it properly, can make us into a new people. Think of Beethoven. He created his Ninth Symphony when he was literally stone deaf. He wrote the scores to the music, conducted the Ninth Symphony, not hearing a note. And at the end of the symphony, when they applauded him, they had to tell him he was being applauded. He couldn't hear. But if any of you know anything about Beethoven, he was a great composer, one of the greatest in the world. When he was about 30 years old, he began going deaf. And at first he was extremely depressed, but then realized that instead of being depressed, he could make something of his life. And so he decided not to just stand still, but to become creative again. The Holy Father says, human suffering is a mystery. Don't look for suffering, and we should do everything in our power to eliminate suffering. So if you have a bad tooth, go to the dentist. If you need to see a doctor, go to the doctor. If you're having mental issues, get some help, some guidance, some counseling. That's only common sense. Technology and science and medicine are there to help us and to eliminate illness. The same thing goes with so many different programs that we may have in our nation, whether they be privately funded or federally funded. Oftentimes they're to help people eliminate poverty, and on and on. There's so many good things that help eliminate poverty or illness or even war. Look at the many people who work at promoting peace. My friend Jim Foley, who died over a year ago now in Syria, was decapitated. There's a whole group of people at Marquette University in his name who are working at promoting peace and harmony among peoples. It's never easy. But in the end, all of us are going to face suffering. Why do we suffer? Well, it's a mystery, but the Holy Father says that suffering can do three things. First, it can expand our ability to love. Think of you when you're taking care of somebody who's ill. Perhaps you never thought you'd be able to do it. I often hear people tell me, Father, I never thought I'd be in this position. I never thought I'd be able to take care of an ailing husband or a sick wife. And now that I'm in this situation, I find that I'm given this extraordinary ability. I often see it when people are dying and the whole family comes around the patient. And they're able to love in ways that they never thought possible. I hear their kids will say, I never thought I'd be able to take care of my mother or father, to change them and wash them. I never thought that possible. But I realized how much love I was given. So suffering can expand our horizons. It can enable us to do things that we never thought possible, because that's what love does. If you never suffer in life, you'll never learn how to love. Suffering enables us to love. The second thing he says is that suffering enables us to learn humility. I think of the programs that so many people are involved in today, whether it be through drugs or alcohol, and they get into these step programs, 9-step programs, 12-step programs. What is it at the end that people often say? I can't do it alone. And suffering tells all of us that we need one another. So often we can be very independent, think that we can accomplish everything with our own skills, under our own power. But the Holy Father says suffering enables us to learn humility. I have a friend of mine in Manchester. Her name is Lori. Lori grew up in a home where her father was an alcoholic and her mother was mentally ill. She was schizophrenic, bipolar. And as a little girl, from the time Lori was 6 years old, she had to take care of her younger sister who was 4. She had to feed her, she had to clothe her, she had to walk her to school. Her mother was unable and the father was non-functional. I remember she telling me often, when I was a little girl, I used to get on my knees every night on my bed. I used to say, look, I'd like a family like everybody else. Why has this happened to me? Again, why? Why? We ask that question constantly. And she said, only later on in life that I realized how all of those situations in life, as ugly as they were, helped me to become the woman I am today. Lori today is a beautiful woman, strong. She's aggressive in a very beautiful way. She stands up for her rights. And what she's been doing for the last 10 years is working to better understand mental illness. This summer she walked the Camino. She walked in Spain to a site of pilgrimage, Santiago, St. James, where she was again able to raise money to help people who are ill. She went with 2 of her children, teaching her children how important it is never to judge a person who may be experiencing mental or emotional difficulties. You see, that's humility. Huh? You learn through the mistake of others or sometimes through your own or in your own pain. And what Lori did so beautifully, she always turned to God. Even to this day, she turns to the Lord. In the end, the Holy Father says, there are many points, I'm just giving you 3. First, it expands our love. It teaches us to be humble. And the third thing is that suffering can transform us. Think of it. Suffering can make us into a new person. I often say, if you don't teach your kids to suffer a bit, they're going to be spoiled. I mean that. You're going to teach your kids that suffering's part of life. They have a bad teacher, they may not like their teacher, well, get over it, because you know what? You'll meet a lot of people when you're at work that you may not like. And you'll have to learn to work with them, whether you like it or not. You're going to get paid at the end of the day. You may at times not want to work at home and always expect something in return, but working is part of life. It's a consequence of original sin. But you can turn work into something beautiful. You can learn your creativity the more you work. So don't be afraid to teach your children sacrifice, to teach them how to work, to teach them how to do chores at home without always expecting to be paid. They're not going to grow that way. It's all about learning the dimensions of human suffering, which don't have to be negatively impacting us, but they can help us become, as St. Paul says, a new creation. So it takes humility, and Jesus in today's gospel ends with this: if anyone wishes to be first, he shall be the last of all, and the servant of all. Then he uses the example of a child, because a child has the ability to learn. A child doesn't judge. A child is so open to whatever you present him. He trusts. He's taking a child, he placed it in their midst, putting his arms around it, he said to them, whoever receives one child such as this in my name receives me. And whoever receives me receives not me, but the one who sent me. So as we continue to journey during this beautiful last days of summer, let's really take some time not to reject suffering, not to always try to take an aspirin because we have a headache, But let's learn that suffering can also be an indication of something better that's going on in our lives. An opportunity for growth, for greater charity, for humility, and in the end, to be transformed.